It's the Mahatma Randy Show. Oh, hello. I did not see you there. Welcome to episode number 44 of the Mahatma Randy Show.
WTOT, as far as the eye can see.
44 is for you. You know, I don't have a lot of views here. I've got maybe 100 subscribers, and my average video gets maybe 30 people looking at it. And a couple of months ago, just as a joke, I did a little 30-second Power Rangers gag, and boom, I got 15,000 views. So in a shameless attempt to make myself more popular, I am going to review Power Rangers RPM, which is actually something that I've wanted to do for quite some time, because it is actually the best of the Power Rangers series. And I'm completely serious about that. I know you're expecting me to be ironic or sarcastic or whatever, but no, it actually is a pretty good show. In part because it's Battlestar Galactica, but I'll explain that later. Now, Power Rangers RPM actually has the most elaborate backstory of any Power Rangers series. And so I figure instead of doing it in out-of-sequence flashbacks like the series itself does, much like Lost, which I think it was deliberately copying, I am going to put them together chronologically because I don't think I've ever actually seen anyone do that before. And it's just kind of interesting, and it's probably more interesting for you, the viewer. So please do watch, won't you? And if you like it, please subscribe and share and tell your friends. I intend to do more stuff like this, although probably a lot of it won't be Power Rangers. Thank you. Here we go. We start off with a little blind girl named Tanaya. Don't worry, the video won't always be this sketchy. I just didn't have much footage to work with here. We also meet her brother Dylan, who is not blind. He's given a watch, which will be significant. Meanwhile, in Scotland, I hope, there's a little boy named Flynn who wants to help people more than anything else. He never hesitates to throw himself into the fray whenever there's a possibility to rescue someone, and he always gets his ass kicked. He's even repudiated by the people he tries to help. Meanwhile, a little girl is left alone to play. She is hanging out with a friend and starts doodling super complex math just for funsies because she's a super genius. And then the men in black show up. Stupidly, she decides she should take a ride with the strangers. Flynn, meanwhile, explains yet another one of his run-ins to his dad. His dad is getting indignant at this and tells him there's no such thing as superheroes. Kay, meanwhile, has been basically a hostage of these people for years. They've told her, well, a year. They tell her that she's very sick and that sunlight will kill her. And they're keeping her in here for her own safety. And, by the way, as long as you're here and can't do anything, could you crack these launch codes for us, please? That would be super keen. We get this really neat montage here of time passing for her. It's a lot of time. It is probably 7 or 8 years. Now she's played by another actress. Flynn, by this point, has graduated high school. And Dr. K celebrates yet another birthday. And this brings us up on probably the most messed up thing in the entire history of Power Rangers. I can't even remember my own name. Flynn is a cop. He busts the mayor's son and gets thrown off the force. The men in black decide that Kay should have friends, so they introduce her to these two. But they're idiots, so let's not spend any time on them right now. Flynn is a fireman. However, he is recklessly endangering himself in order to save goldfish and furniture, so boom. Kay has yet another birthday. Her idiot friends give her a present, the first one she's ever gotten. It's a pencil, because they're idiots. However, this is the first time anybody has shown any kind of compassion towards her. Flynn is in the Peace Corps, and he's told by his coworkers to pull out because apparently a tennis racket factory is coming through and screw the natives. Flynn does not take this well. Kay, meanwhile, comes across a butterfly. She seldom leaves her room, but for some reason she's unsupervised. She goes into a dark room, and she doesn't die when the sunlight hits her. Remember, she's been told that it'll kill her. Flynn, meanwhile, has gone all Braveheart, fired up the locals into a rebel group, and, well, once again, it's Flynn, another failure. Kay, meanwhile, has built this kind of virus to help her get around the security measures in the facility and escape, since she knows she's not sick. And this is where things go horribly wrong.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that. This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
This scene right here is actually probably one of the most dramatic ones in all of Power Rangers. They're dragging her off screaming while she's desperately trying to put in the control code for the Venjix virus, because you see, Venjix is just supposed to shut down the security in the system, but she knows without that it'll escape. Meanwhile, this is Summer. She's just a spoiled rich bitch who's good on motorcycles and treats her butler really badly. We'll come back to her. Venjix, meanwhile, escapes and gets out into the world. In very short order, it infects most of the internet, and everybody finds out about it. The UN debates what to do. There's much acrimony and screaming, and the militaries around the world start destroying computers and things that they suspect are infected. Here's Ziggy. Ziggy's a 15 or 16-year-old kid who decides that he needs to take his driver's lessons. And he fails pretty badly. The stock market craters, and Venjix goes on to extend his control over the world. Because it's Battlestar Galactica. This is Summer, who is a martial arts prodigy. If she looks familiar to you, it's because she is the only Power Rangers actress to ever actually go on to any kind of success. She was on that iZombie show for a couple of years. Anyway, that Ziggy guy, who can't drive, somehow got a job with the Mafia, being a wheelman. I'm not even joking, that's his job. Summer has her Sweet 16 party, and she's all super duper excited and looking forward to having her family there. Meanwhile, the world is going to hell, and Scott here is a young pilot, maybe 20 years old, hauled out of ROTC or whatever to be trained how to fight. Summer, meanwhile, discovers that her parents aren't coming, and she's kind of heartbroken by that. They sent a gift instead. Colonel Truman, meanwhile, seems to be the guy who's in charge of what's left of the military. He is also in charge of Scott's fighter squadron. Kind of a Commander Adama Apollo thing going on here. Summer is sad, and Venjix attacks.
The final annihilation of the life form known as man. Let the attack begin.
Because it's Battlestar Galactica. Now, as far as we can tell, there hasn't been any fighting up to this point. Venjix has simply been taking control of factories and resources, allocating stuff, positioning his pieces for the final attack, and basically just getting ready. When he actually launches the attack, it seems to come out of nowhere, all at once, everywhere around the world. Flynn, for instance, is at home talking to his dad for advice about his life as a failure, when all of a sudden, boom! And Scott is being trained when it hits there, too. Ziggy's meeting with the mob. Summer is sad. This is a lot like that scene in Lost. You know how all of the flashbacks relate to the tail falling off? We see it from different positions throughout the run of the series whenever they flash back to it. This is kind of like that here, too. Everything seems to revolve around the scene or tie back to it. So Summer is running along with a bunch of her friends, grabs a military convoy and tries to get on board. However, because not only is she a rich bitch, but all of her friends are rich bitches, too, there's no room for her. And they immediately sacrifice her to try and save themselves. So she's left alone running through the desert for some reason, and she gets attacked and left for dead. Meanwhile, Scott's squadron is getting ready to attack Venjix's forces. Summer, I love this scene of her losing all of her money, and she's rescued by her butler who's stole an ice cream truck somehow. Venjix, meanwhile, is not just killing people. He's keeping eyes on ones that he thinks are interesting, and he is kidnapping them and experimenting on them. That was one of the more messed up scenes in Power Rangers right there. Dylan, meanwhile, somehow manages to escape. How this happens is not entirely clear. And he goes wandering around the main Venjix compound. Summer, meanwhile, is being hauled through the wilderness by her butler, and Dylan and his sister try to escape, but she gets pulled off. And the butler tries to defend Summer from one of the Venjix's kill squads and takes a bad injury. Fortunately, refreshingly for a change, the girl is actually pretty good in the fight scenes. But something coming up here is pretty remarkable. This right here, her butler, she tries to rescue him. And this right there, that was it. Did you blink? This is the only on-screen death scene in all of Power Rangers, which is kind of remarkable. Meanwhile, there's the city of Corinth. which is under attack by Venjix's forces, and Scott's squadron is attempting to fight them off. Scott is second, his brother is in the lead, and things go very badly, very, very quickly, and to nobody's surprise, Scott's older brother, the beloved best pilot around, gets shot, and because it's Battlestar Galactica. By the way, I am, in fact, a science fiction writer, and I'm allegedly a pretty good one. If you would like to please purchase a copy of my book, The Care and Feeding of Nightmares, there will be a link in the description below. It's like $1.99 on Kindle and more than $1.99 on not Kindle. I don't know. So, please pick up a copy. Digital download or actual dead. By the way, here's a picture of me. Whichever. We now return you to the fall of Corinth, already in progress. So, Scott gets shot down too and is forced to bail out using an electrical switch. Meanwhile, Flynn and various other refugees arrive in Corinth, the domed city. There's a woman there trying to find her child, but nobody will help. Flynn sees this and is understandably upset because he's inherently heroic. Scott, meanwhile, is left to die in the desert and stumbling around, messed up with a broken arm or something. And there's some fairly intense fighting going on around the city. You'll notice that this is actually pretty intense. Summer gets to the city and is reunited with her parents, but by this point she has realized that her real parent, the person that really raised her, was her butler. So she decides rather than stay in safety, she's gonna make a run for it and see if she can rescue anybody out there. And off she goes. Flynn, likewise, decides to be heroic once again and rides off. So Summer, who is a motorcycle prodigy, will recall, finds Scott somehow, and although he's kind of messed up with a broken arm, she displays uncharacteristic caring because, well, like I said, she's a rich bitch. This is honestly the first unselfish thing she's ever done in her life, so far as we know. Again, a lot of fighting. Scott says, we're never going to make it. She says, you want to bet? Which is surprisingly cavalier and cool. Flynn, meanwhile, manages to find a whole bunch of refugees and goes after them and rescues them, including the kid that the mother was crying about earlier. Rescues her, fights off some of the obligatory mooks, mookbots, Cylons, whatever. Meanwhile, back at the city, tons of fighting going on. Colonel Truman is overseeing the last defense. It is implied that the rest of the world has already fallen by this point, and that Corinth is the only place left, the last Battlestar, if you will. He gives the kid back to the mom. And he's pretty impressed by Flynn's bravado and heroism, first time ever, really. And again, it's implied that there's just all kinds of civilian casualties going on here. Truman gives the order to close up the city and says that if there's anybody outside, God help them because we can't. And Summer and Scott manage to slide in just before they activate the force field in the dome and the holographic projector and everything inside. And, well, they're all just a bunch of big damn heroes.
Give enough time just to see. Okay.
Okay, then 10 years after World War IV.
2051. No, more.
What? No.
2051, the future.
They saw it already.
Clearly a lot of Road Warrior influences going on here. Everything is dead. Dylan, big surprise, sees that there's a flower alive. There's actually no life anywhere. Part of this whole show is that the environment of the world has been completely destroyed. Still, Dylan finds some. Ziggy, as you'll recall, is a wheelman for the mob now. And on his off times, he visits the orphanage. He was apparently raised in an orphanage, and while he's there, he sees all kinds of sick and otherwise messed up kids. There's an awful lot of orphans in this post-apocalyptic world. Meanwhile, out in the apocalyptic parts, Dylan is being a hero and beating up mooks, which is kind of the thing in this show. Ziggy, meanwhile, is driving a delivery around for the mob and looks for a tire to replace the flat and finds that the truck is full of medical supplies. Realizing that they really are medical supplies, he immediately takes them to the orphanage to do the right thing, because despite working for the mob, Ziggy's a good guy. So he puts the orphans to work, and then he realizes he's screwed the mob and will die, so he decides to ride off into the desert and die by himself. Dylan, meanwhile, is looking for directions to the city of Corinth. Ziggy is in his dead truck and just happens to see him there, so he sneaks up on him and tries to bluff him into taking his car, and a pretty good scene. That's a muffler, by the way. Dylan ain't having none, though, so since he's seen the Road Warrior. And Ziggy's able to convince him that he knows the way to the city. So Dylan reluctantly takes him with him as they head towards it. They meet a lot of Venjik's defenses that have been set up around the city in the intervening year, but they go through a bunch of Cylons. And I probably showed too much of the chase here. I suppose I'm being indulgent, but I just think it's a cool car. Anyway, he gets past the defenses and into the city, but completely unsurprisingly, this leaves a big hole in the defenses, and a bunch of bad guys just come in. They also start flying through the dome. The force field doesn't seem to do very much. Yeah, we get it there, sport, you're a hero. Anyway, so the Rangers show up, and surprising absolutely nobody, particularly those who've seen the opening titles, the Rangers are the 3 characters we've met thus far. So they transform, and they go running around fighting the bad guys. The little spinny things on the ankles there, the calves, I mean, they never do that again. By the way, the fights with Yellow are actually a high part of this series. And I love her little carry on citizen bit there. I think that's kind of cool. Honestly, of all of the chicks in all of the Power Rangers shows, she's got the most cavalier attitude. It's sort of refreshing. Dylan, meanwhile, decides to run into a bunch of the bad guys with his car, causing them to shoot down a bunch of planes with a heavy gun they were bringing in, and Yellow comes up to thank him for his actions in allowing the city to get invaded, and guards come up and drag him off. Ziggy tries to claim he doesn't know the guy, but this show ends up with them in prison, very sensibly. It makes sense. Boom. And that's the end. That's all I got this week. Thank you very much. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe, and please check out a copy of my book, if you would be so kind. Thank you very much. Have a good day. And now, get the hell out of here. And stop staring at my hair. I get it cut like this on purpose. Oh God, no!